I'm Julia, and to my right is Robbie, and he will be introducing himself in about 5 minutes if I keep to plan. So you can just grab this off me in 5 minutes
It's a really big
if I'm not on track. So really pleased to be here this morning to be sharing the Pathway Potential Tool, or the Potential Pathway Tool. It's a working title, we haven't quite decided yet. I'm really pleased to be sharing it because I think it does go some way to making talent development and identification a little bit fairer. Having said that, I was really attentive this morning to the panelists, and it did give me pause for thought in terms of the filter that we're applying. So what I would ask, I think, because we are talking about a work in progress, an award-winning work in progress. Thank you. Wish we were going to bring the award and put it there, weren't we? Because we're talking about a work in progress, what I would ask each and every one of you to do is, for the next half hour or 25 minutes, however long we've got, to set your intention around attention to scrutiny. One of the reasons we wanted to share the tool with you today was because selfishly we really want to get feedback on the tool. As part of this, we'll be asking you to look at the reports that the tool generates, the user report and the assessor report. So use the time in the exercise section to really dissect what we're sharing with you. Because if you see problems, if you see great things in it, great. But if you see problems in it, we genuinely want to know about them. So, we haven't got the slides up. Thank you. I'm going to share with you over the next 20 minutes now, probably. First, we're going to talk to you about the challenge. Why did we create the tool? So what are the reasons that we wanted to create this potential pathway tool? Then we're going to, I'm going to take you through the design. Robbie's then going to share a deep dive for Robbie, into one of the pilot areas. So we piloted the tool in the Future Talent Programme, so he's going to share that with you. And then we're very much going to pass it over to you for the exercise to have a look at the reports, and then come back for Q&A, which hopefully will take us up just before 11:30, so we can all go off to our next workshop. Okay, so with the challenge, there are two things I think we were trying to solve, two problems that we were trying to solve with this tool. One was around building more objectivity into talent development and talent identification. Why did we want more objectivity? Because I think objectivity leads to more inclusive decisions. I'm charged with creating diverse pipelines at BAE, so I want those decisions about who we're identifying as high potential talent to be as inclusive as possible, and therefore we wanted to build objectivity into those decisions. So that was reason one, objectivity leading to inclusion. Reason two, so the second why, was I don't think BAE is unique in having lots of people managers who aren't necessarily right in their comfort zone when they're having development conversations. So we've got a lot of engineers, a lot of very left-brained engineers, and so development conversations are a bit of a challenge for them. So what we wanted was a tool, an engaging tool for both user and manager that would provide structure in development conversations, and also, where necessary, scripts of specific coaching questions to ask, because I don't think there's any shame if it's not a comfort area for you as a line manager to use those scripts. So what we wanted to do was create a tool that would help with development conversations in order to build those relationships between line manager and employee, people manager and employee, because I think we've learned this morning that it's all about the relationships. So that was the challenge. If I move on to design, where we finally get to the slide, essentially what we did, and when I say we, I use that in the royal we sense, because this was definitely a co-creation with Inspire. Where's Julie? she's all ready for your questions later. So what we did was take the 12 attributes, BAE attributes, which include, in orange you can see there are 8 company behaviours, which were launched in 2019. So those 8 behaviours, and then the 3 aspects of our high potential model, which are aspiration, ability, and performance. Good. I quite often forget one of those. I'm glad I remembered all 3. And then we folded in self-awareness for good measure. So we took those 12 attributes and mapped them against the Lumina qualities. Sounds easy. There was quite a lot of midnight oil burnt by the Inspire team and by the BAE team, just arguing over little nuances and little words. But eventually we got there, and what that then does is, if the user then goes in and fills in the Lumina Spark questionnaire, it churns out in the background a user report and an assessor report, which we're going to ask you to look at very shortly. We wanted that tool to be as engaging as possible, so have a look at how engaging you think it is. We piloted it in diverse areas. So we piloted it in a functional area, in our finance area, with our general managers, so on our general manager pathway, and in the Future Talent Programme, which is the one that Robbie's going to take you through in more detail in about 30 seconds. I suppose the last thing I would say is feedback so far is good. It is helping with self-awareness, as any psychometric should. It is supporting people managers in conversations. And I think it is being used as one data point that's building in a bit more objectivity into those decisions about people's futures. So feedback is good around the pilots. Robbie's going to take you through a bit more detail in one specific area. I was going to say I have slides that show more detail, but I'm not confident that they're actually there. Just press forward a couple of slides. Yeah, so if any of you, and I'm sure some of you do, have preference around detail, then I can share more of that with you later, but we don't have time to go through that in the time allotted this morning. So, hope that all made sense. Some faces look as though it did, some faces maybe not. But Robbie's going to bring it all to life now in the Future Talent Programme area. No pressure, Robbie.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, I'm our Future Talent Programme lead, and the Future Talent Programme is our high potential follow-on programme that spills out of our graduate programme. So for 10% of our exiting or completing graduates, they get an opportunity to come and be assessed, and if successful, come onto our programme for 18 months, where we try and accelerate their development and work with getting them up the ladder a little bit quicker, getting them up the leader ladder a little bit quicker. So where does this fit in with our pathway tool? So we use this as an insight-driven tool. So we have the 2 reports, which you'll see on your tables pretty soon. One aimed at the individual, and one very much aimed at the support network, the management, the functional support that wraps around that individual. And this was used as part of the assessment phase, not as part of their assessment, and I'll come back to that in a minute because that was a bit of a sore point, but it was used as part of, understand yourself. How do you want to develop across this next time if you're successful to come on the programme? What behaviours do you want to work on? What behaviours you're already good at and you want to kind of bolster? So we accessed this as part of their programme, and then their panel for coming on and being assessed were given access to the report so that they could see what was seen, and they could kind of make a judgment on how has this individual interpreted it, and how has this individual interwoven that into their aspirations, but also into their development goals across the next 18 to 24 months. So that was how we were going to do it, and how did it go? Well, thankfully, mostly well. Not without hiccup, though, as you probably can imagine. It's not for everyone, these types of things, and not everyone aligned on their own insights with themselves, with what came up in the report. And thankfully, Stevie from our partner supplier was really, really good to help with trying to let people understand what it was saying to them, and why it was saying it, And some people still didn't get it, and they tended to be really, really low on self-awareness, as you might expect. But some interesting conversations that took place and are still ongoing in some individuals. But yeah, mostly landed well, especially for the managers. Really, I think quite a lot of our graduate population are managed by what you would call junior leaders, probably not very experienced in line management. And this was kind of a cheat card. This was this person likes to be developed like this. You might want to communicate with this person. You might not want to expect this person to react in this way, and this is how they would prefer to be treated, and so on and so forth. So really, really useful for the management, but also for the individuals. And a lot of them have actually commented that it's been one of the most enjoyable parts of the program, which maybe gives me some food for thought, but it's all downhill from there. We did have some misuse of the tool. And again, I'll come back to this in the learning points in a second, but we had some misuse of the tool during the assessment selection phase, and I mentioned up here it was used as part of going into their assessment, but not for assessment. And we were probably a little bit naive in giving this tool out to the businesses and expecting them not to use it as a selection tool. So there were some areas that were kind of saying, well, this person's scoring high on all this, so they should go forward or shouldn't go forward based on that. And we had to kind of stamp that out and make sure that it was used purely as an assessment of what they'd like to do, not an assessment of their ability. So what do we learn? And again, you're all Lumina practitioners, I'm not, so this is going to be kind of my non-practitioner view of not having your insight and your experience. So there's a lot of this where you're going to be going, oh God, the sea's wet, no way. But it's a tool for insight on preferences, not an assessment of ability. And I think that'll be obvious to you, but it wasn't obvious to a lot of the people who accessed it. And I think, if I could go back, I'd probably spend some more time on hammering that into people so that it wasn't misused and it wasn't misunderstood, because it can be a very powerful tool, but in opposite ways, right? If someone really gets it and understands it and drives the most out of it, it's fantastic. But it can also turn people off, especially if they're not properly engaged and they don't properly understand it. It generates productive conversations. I think that's the best thing about it. And in conversations with Stevie and his team, when we did a feedback loop, one of the things that came out was some of the language is quite severe. 99% fantasist. Some people went away thinking...
Who was that, Robbie?
Well, yeah. No answer on that. But regardless of whether it's severe language or regardless of whether someone agrees with it wholeheartedly or finds parts of it spiky and uncomfortable, it generates a productive conversation. And they might come away from that conversation thinking, I still don't understand it, I still don't believe it, I still don't agree with it. But they've had that productive conversation and they've had that exploratory insight with their line managers and with their functional leaders. And the last bit, again, and you'll all know this as practitioners, but the value or the benefit is inextricably linked to the user's understanding of the tool. So for those that really bought into it, for those that really kind of understood it and used it in the correct fashion, worked really, really well. But for those that didn't, it was quite dicey at times. So I guess the key learning points, if I was to go back, was to make sure we've got people in the business that can help it land correctly and can help people understand it correctly to stop it from having a negative impact. It produces some really good conversations, regardless of whether they enjoy them or not. And the obvious that it's an insight on preference, not an insight on ability. So we need to not use that as a tool to rule people in or out. But overall, a roaring success with a few bumps along the way. But I think it's been brilliant and it's been really enjoyable to work with you all on it. So thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. The work you're doing seems incredible, so really great job and very well-deserved win on the award. My question is, the level of customization here is quite, there's a lot of work that's gone into customizing the reports. Is this something that you guys did on your end? Is something that Lumina did fully for you? Is this something very easy to do for other companies, or was it a very manual process?
Great question. So BAE do like to customize. I would say it's in our culture to customize, sometimes creates problems further down the road. So definitely it's highly customized, and it was a joint effort between Inspire and BAE, with Inspire doing all the psych work around the mapping. So how do the Lumina qualities underpin the behaviours and the high potential model? And I suppose the BAE part of the deal was to bring a whole load of stakeholders together and get their buy-in to the fact that this was something that objectively looked at potential and could be used in the identification of high potentials. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you.
Lady with the mic. Hi. Oh, sorry, that's a bit loud. So we're a table of psychologists here. We've got 6 psychologists. So we were keen to understand how do you ensure your tool is valid and reliable from a psychological perspective?
Yeah, really good question. I'll get Julie to answer it in depth. I would say that one of the things we did do when we first began with the tool, we were just using Lumina Spark, and we added in a motion that gave it more validity. But how we've ensured it is to bring in the experts.
Our own world-class psychometrician, Julie Enser.
Hi. Okay. Yes, I'll talk a little bit about how we actually developed the tool. So, as Julia mentioned, we were actually working with the 40 quality version. So we had Spark and Emotion. So we had the 5-factor framework sort of at its core. And then we set about devising, well, what does good look like in relation to those 12 attributes? So we were trying to devise a high potential tool that was reflective of the needs of the organization, the values, and of course we had this framework. And then it was basically setting about how we could make sure we were devising a high potential measure that was, as I said, reflective of all of these things, but also recognizing that, you know, this was going to be applied at various different levels throughout the organization for different groups. So we set about doing a number of benchmarking exercises. So what we were conscious of is we didn't want to create this kind of, you know, one-size-fits-all template that everyone had to kind of adhere to. But at the same time, recognizing that there are, you know, certain requirements for leadership positions where we do want to ensure that we're getting people who have the kind of right preferences, who are going to be engaged and enthused and energized by those kind of roles. So as I said, we did the benchmarking exercise and we came up with these kind of essentially the mappings for each of the 12 attributes that reflected all of those kind of those needs. And then the assessor report is actually where we kind of do the customization for those different levels. So what you'll notice is there's a benchmark which basically tells you against those attributes kind of where we would expect individuals from those different groups to kind of come out. So that was where the kind of tailored kind of component came into it. In terms of reliability and validity, of course, the tools that we're working with are highly reliable and valid, but also was a conscious effort to make sure that we were ensuring that there was the kind of diversity was reflected as well in the tool.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're sorry.
I think Stu wants to just add a comment on that.
Yeah, can I just add one thing just to pick up on what Tao said in the previous session, which is there is a risk in this sort of study that certain competencies could have biases baked in at the start. So how did we address that? I think if you look at them there, that they are pretty diverse around the outside. And in terms of our psychometric using Spark and Emotion, because we reduce evaluative bias in the design of the Spark and Emotion psychometric, it is much less prone to those biases than if you had an instrument in the first place that may have a gender or ethnic bias in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. Agree. Yeah. But there is no getting away from the fact that with our 12 attributes, we are overlaying a filter, you know, and we will need to see what that filter produces in terms of our, you know, our underrepresented groups not appearing, why not, and then go back and look at the details. So that was a really good prompt for me this morning.
There was a couple more hands that went up just where our mic is, just in front of you. Who was there?
Yeah, thank you. So it seems like a really thorough, well thought through piece of work, and I think that you seem to have done such a fabulous job of putting everything together and making it really clear. It occurs to us as we looked at the documents that it seems really heavily detailed and potentially orientated towards those that lead with blue. Was that a conscious decision for you in your organisation? And what else have you planned for other archetypes?
Really interesting question, because I would say culturally, we definitely lead with red and blue. We're an organisation that at its core is engineers. If that has played out in the reports, 1 minute left, it wasn't conscious. So that's a really great observation to get. Detail-wise, that is probably playing to our audience, because it's an audience that likes detail, wants structure, wants to know the nth degree of the logic behind things. But yeah, I will take that as feedback rather than as a question.
Sorry, Rob. There's one more here, I think.
I've already got the mic. Hello, good morning. I have a question around the self-awareness piece. And I'm looking at the assessor report, and under it says has a growth mindset. And also having a look at where self-awareness has been mapped onto here, it comes on that very introverted, intimate side. And I'm just interested to see, or to understand why it sits there, and not, because for me, self-awareness and that growth mindset can sit anywhere. So I'm wondering why it sits specifically in that area when it was mapped.
Again, that's a really good insight. Julie may have to give you a detailed response. I'd say that might come from, culturally, I'd say maybe we want people to be more reflective around their self-awareness, and that's why we've gone to those qualities. But that is the lame person's view. So Julie, feel free to contradict me.
Yeah, so I mean, over there it is kind of positioned on the model, but it's of course a smoothie. So we are looking at a combination of different qualities. So when we actually came up with the self-awareness kind of smoothie of qualities, of course we were looking at kind of BAE Systems sort of definition of it, because of course it is a very it can be a very varied way of looking at self-awareness. So actually the qualities we used were a combination of being introspective, which is from the Lumina emotion model, which is very much about, are you somebody who's interested in kind of internally curious, essentially. We also looked at, are they even-tempered? So do they have kind of good emotional control? Empathetic, so of course part of being self-aware is being able to understand how other people perceive you. We also had regard for others, so do they actually kind of trust other people, and do they kind of have a healthy kind of respect for people, as well as being flexible, so being able to kind of tune up and tune down their behaviours according to the situational needs. So it was a combination of that, and we weighted them, so there's certain qualities that kind of take a little bit more precedence, but essentially it's kind of our understanding of self-awareness, but tailored to the specific kind of self-awareness definition that was supplied by you guys.
Sorry, that was my fault.
Sorry, I was just thinking about the growth mindset piece and how you're looking at it in this report, and it's under self-awareness, but someone could be self-aware and have a fixed mindset. Or they could, it's, for me, it's they don't match self-awareness and growth mindset.
Yeah, okay.
But on here it looks like they are. So that would be just my thought about maybe. I mean, it's probably been done for a reason, but I was just wondering about what that is.
Again, that's. I hope somebody's writing this down. That's really good. Okay, thank you.
It's going, how does this work?
That's a question.
Thank you. And I would say that we are available for questions post the event, because we genuinely do want to get the feedback.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, because I agree with you for sure. You can have, high degree of self-awareness and also a fixed mindset. So we were careful to bring in the blockers and overextended use to kind of to reflect that. So somebody could actually be really high on self-awareness and actually have a lot of blockers as well. So, we're trying to look at it through kind of a varied way, kind of a different perspectives that, you can have a lot of strength and potential in an area, but there can also be other aspects of your personality that are kind of working against you. So that was very much the rationale to bring in the blockers and overextended use. And I remember I was kind of talking about, well, is it too much complexity? Are we bringing in too much detail here? But actually, I think it was really important for people to kind of get that well-rounded perspective.
And that is one of the bits when we're going through the reports that does need somebody that understands them to be able to bring that bit to life. Absolutely.
Portraits, the reports were deliberately deluminized because that was, you know, as any decision in a corporation, there was multiple people involved, and they were deliberately deluminized. So what you're seeing is you see some of the 40 qualities, but that's it. The feedback was actually they want to slightly reluminize it again. So again, just for our understanding, because this is a Lumina conference, that this was the pilot, and the next version will kind of somehow bring Lumina slightly closer, because there was a realization that many people that get this report will have had a Spark report already. So they would have done the self-awareness, they will have a knowledge about the tool, about the model, and they can connect it, and there's an extra value in that connection.
Too long. So I suppose in summary, and there was a summary slide, but I'm not even going to go there. In summary, I think the tool has done what we wanted it to do in terms of bringing more objectivity into talent identification and supporting conversations. Excellent, thank you.
Finally, a use for me.
There are some watch outs that we've discovered in the pilot groups, and I'd say importantly next steps, and this came up when I was wandering around the tables. The tool isn't automated yet, so if we're going to do this at volume, we need to do that automation, which is, you know, probably take some time, and we also need to build internal capability so that we've got people that really understand what sits behind the tool and understand the Lumina piece as well as they do the BAE piece.